Hey everyone, welcome to class 12 biology session, and in this video let's grab some knowledge about abiotic factors of the chapter Organisms and Population. Without any further delay, let's move on. Here we have organism. Organism basically it's a living component of the environment. Then we have species. Look, without species, definitely an environment is completely incomplete. So species are a group of interbreeding. Now this is an important word to highlight. It's an interbreeding individuals of a population. Species are the one that will continue the race. Race in the sense they will undergo the process of reproduction, or we can call it as breeding. So this breeding is a very important process here. Population, that's the total sum of individuals living in a particular area. Biotic community, from the word biotic itself. Bio means the word life. Life, which means that the forms which have life in it. So that includes plants, animals, microbes. Ecosystem is basically the sum of the biotic and the abiotic components. Now, abiotic components such as soil, then we have water, we have temperature, etc. We'll be discussing this in the following time. Biome is a large unit of environment with flora and fauna in a specific climatic zone. The biosphere, where all ecosystems of the world will form a biosphere. All the ecosystems, for example, we have the desert ecosystem, we have the tundra ecosystem, we have the tropical ecosystem, etc. We'll be discussing that too. An environment is the sum of the total physical and the biotic conditions. Basically, environment will have the abiotic and the biotic communities which will influence the organism in terms of survival and reproduction. That's basic layout of the different organization levels. Now let's move to the actual topic of the chapter. Now, ecosystem is the structural and the functional unit of biosphere which associates with the biotic and the abiotic factors. I have already mentioned the biotic factors such as humans, plants, animals, and the abiotic factors such as soil, temperature, water, and most importantly we have light too. Now definitely ecosystem is made up of two types, and the two different types of ecosystem we have is the natural ecosystem and the artificial or the man-made. So for example, let's take the examples of the natural ecosystem. It includes a river, then we also have oceans, which is a natural ecosystem. Artificial ecosystems such as zoo, lakes. Now let's continue about the various seasons. From the beginning of our 4th standard or 5th standard, we have learned the reason why seasons occur. Let's discuss it one more time here. Now seasons, they occur because of the rotation of the earth around the sun. Now let us write the reasons right here. So the number one reason for the occurrence or for the formation of the seasons, that is due to the rotation of earth around the sun. And the second reason, it is that the earth will tilt on its own axis. So earth tilting on its axis. Now these two reasons, they will collectively lead to annual variations. Now this is a very important thing to note. They lead to annual variations which will further result in variations in, it leads to annual variations in intensity and temperatures duration. Now this is the basic factors due to which seasons will occur. So let me summarize it to you once again. Seasons occur due to the rotation of the earth around the sun and the earth tilting on its own axis. And due to this, it will lead to annual variations in intensity and the duration of the temperature, due to which the seasons will be formed. Now we have the different biomes of the world. I have already discussed it. It includes desert, grassland, rainforest, tundra. Now why are biomes formed? Biomes are formed because of two different reasons. First of all, the first reason we take the consideration of this one, it is the annual variations. Annual variations in what? Definitely the annual variations in intensity and the duration of temperature. That's the first reason for biomes, and the annual variation of precipitation. Now precipitation is a very important thing to note. It includes both rain as well as snow. Precipitation alone doesn't mean that rain, it includes both rain and snow. So that leads to the formation of biomes. Now you all must have heard about habitats. Now let's make a note of habitats, how habitats are formed. Habitats are Habitats are what? They are basically the regions where certain animals or plants belong to. Like each and every animal, each and every plant, they have their own habitat. For example, we take the polar bears. What's their habitat? They belong to the Arctic regions or the Antarctic regions. Now they cannot survive in the hot deserts, okay? So that's why each and every animal have their own specific habitat. What are the various reasons which led to the formation of habitat? So regional and the local variations in each biome. We know how biomes are formed, right? Now how are habitats formed? They are formed due to the variations which occur in the biomes. Each and everything here is just interrelated, interconnected to each other. So if we get to understand one thing, then definitely we'll be able to understand the other. Let me summarize it here once again. Seasons, because of the rotation of the earth and the earth tilting on its own axis, it will lead to annual variations in intensity and temperature that will form to seasons. Now biomes, they are formed due to the annual variations in intensity and the temperature duration, plus the annual variations in precipitation. And how are habitats formed? Habitats are formed due to the regional and the local variation in biomes. So each one of them, seasons, biomes and habitats, are just interconnected to each other and they are formed through this process. Now let's have a look at the various biomes of the present in the earth. So we have the tropical rainforest, we have the deciduous forest, we have the evergreen forest, we have the coniferous forest, we have the grasslands, we have the desert ecosystem, we have the tundra region. Now there is a graph in the textbook, and this graph is quite important to understand. Now what it shows is the annual precipitation along the x-axis and the annual mean temperature along the y-axis. You need to memorize or understand what x-axis denotes and what the y-axis denotes, because it was given in one of the past year's question paper. We'll be discussing the past papers questions also. I'll create a different segment for that too. So here is the graph for it. Now we know that the precipitation is less, which means if there is a less rainfall and if the temperature is less, then definitely that belongs to the alpine or the tundra region, because temperature is less, humanity it's very cold. So the regions here are very cold, the season here is very cold, and rainfall is also not that much like how it is shown here in the tropical forest. So you just have to connect the precipitation rate and the temperature and have to mark the particular figures or the shaded regions here. Another example here in coniferous, we have, oh yeah, we have a good high rate of rainfall here, as you can see here, but not that much as tropical rainforest, and the temperature is pretty much low but not lower than the tundra. So you just have to connect that and understand. Now let's go to the major abiotic factors in the ecosystem. So the major abiotic factors of the ecosystem, they are, let's go by the order. Temperature is the most ecological relevant environmental factor. So our number one priority goes to temperature. So that's temperature. The second one, we have water. Then comes the light. And then finally we have soil. Let's discuss in detail about each abiotic factor. Now, temperature, as I have already said, that it is a very important and most determining ecological factor here. Now, what's important to know in temperature is that near the poles, the temperature will be less. So they have less because we know that this is our Earth, and here this is North Pole, this is the South Pole. So we know, okay, this is the equator, and we know that as we move away from the equator, what happens to the temperature? The temperature definitely decreases. So we say that at the poles, the temperature is comparatively lower or lesser than that of the temperature in the equatorial regions. That's why countries such as Middle East or maybe Middle East, Egypt, etc., they have like mostly they have a bit of higher temperature here. So because of this reason, due to the different temperature, what happens is that here if you find, we don't find here a good amount of diversity, but if you come back to the equatorial regions, what happens is that the biodiversity level increases, or I can say that the biodiversity richness increases. So let's make a note here that in the equatorial regions, biodiversity richness increases. It is the most, why? Because the temperature is higher, or we can even write moderate. So that's the thing in temperature. Now the second most, oops, so I don't know what this happens here. Okay, now the second most thing which is important here is about the eurythermal and the stenothermal. That's another important thing to note about in the temperature, eurythermal and stenothermal. Let's just discuss what it is. Okay, so here you go. Let's first discuss about eurythermal. Now, eurythermal are organisms that will tolerate a wide range of temperature. So we write here they tolerate a wide range of temperature. And stenothermal, they are the organisms that will tolerate a very narrow range of temperature. So they tolerate a narrow range of temperature. Eurythermal, they tolerate a wide range of temperature. For example, if you take the example under eurythermal, we have aves. Aves yani birds. So the organisms belonging to eurythermal, they are warm-blooded, which means that they maintain a constant body temperature because of the osmotic constant gradient. So why do we include aves under this category? Because they are warm-blooded, or we can say that they maintain a constant body temperature. Now in the stenothermal, the examples that we can show or give are amphibians. So example of stenothermal, we are going to write amphibians. Now why are amphibians included in this category? Because amphibians, they are cold-blooded, which means that they will not maintain a constant body temperature, yani they are ectotherms, which means their body temperature changes according to the environment. Body temperature according to the environment. And here the warm-blooded organisms, they are called as, or also known as, endotherms. So that's about the temperature here. Let's move to the other factor, which is water, our second most important factor here. Now what comes under factor water? Oh my god, some technical issues are going on. Okay. I'm gonna cut this part. Okay. Now what happens here in water? Water will determine the chemical and the mineral composition. It will also determine the pH value and the salt concentration, which means the salinity. Now depending upon this, again we divide the organisms into euryhaline and stenohaline. Now this is on the basis of salinity, or we can also write here the salt concentration. So the organisms, depending upon the salinity or how much amounts they intake this, or how much salt concentration they can tolerate, we divide it into euryhaline and stenohaline. So euryhaline, again it's the same thing. There it was temperature, here it is salinity. So let's make a quick note on this. Now euryhaline are the organisms that will tolerate a wide range of salinity. For example, we take the organisms such as crabs. Usually the organisms that live in those type of water bodies. So crabs, crocodiles, prawns. Okay, that's it. Next we have stenohaline. Stenohaline, they are the organisms that will tolerate a narrow range of temperature, a narrow range of salinity. We need to clear this confusion between euryhaline, stenohaline, eurythermal and stenothermal, because we don't take any chances to make a mistake during our examinations. So the examples for stenohaline, we write fish, we take aves, mammals. We don't live in oceans, so our body is not acclimated to such type of strong salty concentrations. Acclimatized, sorry. And that's about the abiotic factor water. One more thing to note here is that Many freshwater animals such as fishes, they cannot live for a longer time in the sea. That's pretty much obvious because they are not acclimatized to such a salty concentration, such a wide range of salinity, because they belong to stenohelines. Now this is because of the various osmotic problems that they have. Like for example, due to the osmotic concentration, they cannot balance it well. That's the important thing to note in this. Moving on to the next abiotic factor, which is light. Now, definitely because of light, because of sun, the plants will be able to undergo the process of photosynthesis, or we even call it as photoperiod. Photoperiod is basically the duration of availability of the light in a particular period. So, due to the availability of light, what happens is that the plants will easily undergo the process of photosynthesis. So depending upon the light factor, we can divide the organisms based on two different types, which is diurnal and nocturnal. So diurnal, or the organisms, we have here diurnal and nocturnal. So diurnal are the organisms that will perform activities in presence of light, and nocturnal are the organisms that will perform activities in absence of light, which means at darker places or maybe at night. So for example, for nocturnal we can take cockroaches, a very good example. We can also take the example of bats, and diurnal, for example, plants, because without light they cannot undergo the process of photosynthesis. Now there is another important thing to note under this category, that herbs and shrubs growing in the forest regions, they are under low light conditions. Have you all ever wondered why is it so? Let's just analyze it by drawing a figure. We take the forest regions, right? So forests are basically like big huge trees with so many branches and so many leaves out there. Now we take shrubs and herbs. They're just tiny, like growing just like this. And there's our sun up there, just like that, giving out the rays for the process of photosynthesis. Now what happens here is that the herbs and shrubs growing here, they'll be growing in such type of regions in a low light conditions. Now why is it so? This is because they are overshadowed. Just we need to remember this word. They are overshadowed by the large canopy. Oops, by the large canopied trees. Because of this, they don't get enough light for the process of photosynthesis. Now, light will also determine flowering factor, reproductive and the migratory activities, and timing the foraging. So in presence of light, all these activities such as migration, such as flowering, reproductive activities, and timing the foraging. So that's all about the factor light. Let's move on to the next and the final abiotic factor, and that is soil. What happens in soil, it's nothing much that the characteristics of the soil, such as like soil composition, grain size, aggregation, it all determines the percolation and the water holding capacity of the soil. Now the percolation here, let's just have a quick note of it. So the percolation and the water holding capacity of the soil, it's all determined by the soil composition, about the grain size, and the aggregation of the soil particles. So these characteristics, now if you take the other factors or parameters such as pH, mineral composition, topography, they all will determine to a large extent the vegetation in a given area. So that's it about the abiotic factors. We will learn about the responses to the abiotic factors just in the coming video. Stay tuned for more updates.